sitting on my doorstep, the people's passing by. They're coming back from getting wrecked. Everybody's high. Saturday night, what a bitch, laying on the lawn. The morning comes to bring the switch after the buzz is gone.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Addictions, the podcast about addictions. I'm your host, David Wagner. Before we get things started, I wanted to let everyone know that thanks to a couple of generous donations, I've been able to afford a legitimate domain name for the website. So instead of addictionspodcast.wordpress.com, the new website is simply www.addictionspodcast.com. It's just a more simple name and it's easier to remember. You can still use the same old address, but you'll just be redirected to the new website address. And speaking of the new website, at addictionspodcast.com, you can find links to all of the different places to listen to the show, like Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and all the rest. And I've also set up an archive page where you can find all of the episodes from Season 1. You can also find the links to all of the episodes of Season 2 so far. And if you really love the show and want to help support what I do, there are links to donate via PayPal and Patreon, so go check that out. Now on with the show. On this episode, I speak with Lisa Mclaughlin and Robin McIntosh, founders of a program called Workit Health. Workit Health is an addiction treatment and counseling center, but it's not like most of the typical treatment centers that you'll find. Lisa and Robin do a much better job explaining it than I can, so let's listen to the interview with them. Okay, welcome to another episode of the Addictions Podcast. On this episode, we are speaking with Lisa Mclaughlin and Robin McIntosh, founders of Workit Health. Workit Health is an opiate treatment center with locations here in Michigan and California. And now, from my understanding, Lisa and Robin, Workit Health is a little bit different than your typical run-of-the-mill treatment center. You guys kind of focus on people that kind of fall through the cracks in the system.
Yep, that's right. I think we're different in quite a few ways.
Yeah.
But I think we're different in a few ways, but one we're a hybrid solution. So part of why we started the company is because so many people fall through the cracks, because it's very difficult to get treatment in today's day and age because of access. It's difficult to go away, or if you have an outpatient program, it's difficult to take 8 hours off of work and go during the week. So there's access, and then the delivery is difficult, right? Like the care landscape hasn't changed really since the 1930s. So technology has never been really, it's quite underutilized in the space, outcomes, transparency, all of these things. So Workit is a new approach to delivering addiction care, and we're a hybrid solution. And by that I mean, for opioid addicts, you only have to go into a physical space one time. So it's super convenient for people that live far away or don't have access to care. Like in Michigan specifically, we had somebody drive from the Upper Peninsula all the way down to Southeast Michigan.
Yeah.
It's wonderful because that person was able to go home, day of and start their program all online, and they talk to their care team online. They talk to their care team through the app. They're able to do exercises. They're able to get counseling all delivered the way, they would order a pizza online. So we kind of think of ourselves as dragging addiction care into the 21st century. And I think that's how we're different.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like I was telling Lisa, Robin, I can totally relate because I've had a job, for the last 10 years, the same job. And I've only been clean and sober from opioids for about a year now. And, I couldn't find the help. I had to basically buy my Suboxone on the street and kind of do my own thing. which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
I would have much rather done it in a clinical setting, obviously.
Yeah.
But I couldn't afford to take that time off work. There's just no way.
Yeah, you would be our ideal test case.
Yeah,
You'd be our ideal patient in a lot of ways. So Lisa and I are both in recovery, and I'll let her talk in a second, but I do want to share this one thing. When we first started, we rolled out in Michigan last summer. And when we first started, a lot of the clinicians around us in the community and, kind of the top-down physicians that were prescribing said, why do you think someone's going to want to come to Workit and not buy it on the street? And we said, we're addicts too. We want care to be delivered to us in a safe, convenient, and legal way. It's a silly thing. Like a cancer patient wouldn't have to go to the street to buy chemotherapy.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right.
That's good to hear that you have that personal experience.
Yeah, not just myself. I know countless people, friends and even coworkers who've went through the same kind of stuff, and it's not easy. For example, I live in Montcalm County here in Michigan, which is it's a small county. It's basically mostly all rural area. There's one doctor in our entire county that has a license to prescribe Suboxone, and there's no methadone around here, no methadone clinics or anything like that. So, and the thing is, this was my family doctor, but her Suboxone program is limited in how many patients she can treat. On a monthly basis, I think. So they had me call back the first of the month, every month. I did that for like 7 months, and every time I called, they were fully booked, so, and I just couldn't afford to drive to like Kent County to go to Grand Rapids every day because my job and the gas money and it's just not feasible for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's awesome. I think this is exactly what we need, and there should be a Workit Health in every state, in my opinion.
Thank you. We agree.
Definitely. Are you guys thinking of expanding in the future?
Definitely. I mean, we want to be available all over the state of Michigan. Like, we want to, at least in Michigan, get to a place where no one ever has to drive in their first few weeks of sobriety all the way down from Marquette to Ann Arbor to get treatment. But we're a global company. We can treat from anywhere. So we're first expanding in the states where we have deep roots and we're part of the recovery community and we got sober, and then moving from there to other states where the prescriber levels are just way too low. Like to your point about Macomb, some of the states that are the worst hit with having people struggling to get off of opiates have just really terrible ratios of prescribers to people who have the problem. And so we're really focused on being in those areas first and see it as like a community mission to get there before we lose more people.
Yeah, exactly. And we're losing people at an alarming rate to this thing. It's I've seen some statistics that are just mind-boggling. It's unreal.
It is unreal. And a large part of why Lisa and I started the company, we started it back in 2014 is when we started talking about it, but we started it before the opioid epidemic was even labeled the opioid epidemic. Like for us, it looks very much like going to AA meetings. We have really long-term sobriety, double-digit sobriety, and we started to see in meetings just people dying, and like, where is everybody going? What's happening? Why is, our population being wiped out? And we took it really seriously. Lisa and I have been friends for 10 years too. And we quit our jobs to start this. And we quit our jobs to do a deep dive into how we could leverage technology to make it cheaper and more convenient for people.
Yeah.
You can order food online. You can't order your recovery online. It's kind of a crazy state of affairs. How hard you have to fight to be sober and clean in this world.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I was earlier I was actually checking out the website, it's workithealth.com, and it looks like it's an amazing setup. What you have going, you can set up an intake online and stuff, and just kind of go from there. It looks like there's like kind of like a 6-step process. It seems pretty simple, relatively inexpensive. I mean, compared to a lot of other options out there, it seems top notch.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, when we started, a lot of people that we had coming in were saying that they were paying upwards of $200 a week to buy Suboxone on the street. And we're like, okay, we got to get it down to a price where we can afford to have top-notch social workers and clinicians, doctors, nurse practitioners there for people when they need them, and make sure that like we never have a situation again like you went through where you can't get treatment because the doctor's quota for prescribing is maxed out. We're working all the time to even provide more ways to pay for the program. Like, so people who can't even pay, the $75 fee to be in this comprehensive treatment program, we have care payment partnerships where they can get loans to start the treatment process. We never want to turn anyone away. And we've built the program to meet people where they are in that way.
That's fantastic. Now, you both of you, Robin and Lisa, you ladies are both recovering addicts then.
Right. Yep. Alcoholics and addicts. Yep.
Would you want to touch on those topics for a moment here?
Sure. We love talking about kind of recounting where I've been and who helped me and, where we are now. I think it's incredible. I think it's a resurrection story for any addict and alcoholic. I love hearing the stories. But for me personally, and this is Robin talking, I had more of a traditional trajectory. So, well, as traditional as that could be as an alcoholic. So my alcoholism started manifesting when I was young, probably around 13, 14. And then it just got worse from there. And add kind of morbid conditions to that. I had an eating disorder, drugs, alcohol, you name it. Like I just was addicted to it as soon as I saw it. It was one of those stories. And by the time I was 18, I guess 17 technically, I was already kicked out of high school and in my first rehab. And that started off a chain. And I was really, at the time I was like, this is the worst. I'm so lame right now. I such a big deal out of it. And I look back and I cringe. I'm like so entitled, right? Now that I know that almost nobody gets that kind of care, I look back and I just think, oh, what a brat I was. But it's, I was really lucky. Like in hindsight, oh my goodness, I'm so lucky that my parents did that for me, that they paid for those rehabs. I ended up going to 8 over the time of being 17 all the way to 22, 8 different institutions. So for me, it was a combination of that, but it was really a combination of, really professional care, but also paired with 12-step meetings and that community and all of that. So not everybody, one gets the chance to go to an institution and dry out for 30 days or 40 days, or in my case, 6 months. One, and two, not everybody clicks with 12-step groups. It's unfortunate, but a lot of people don't. I've had a lot of sponsees over the years go out, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So those experiences really shaped what we created at Workit Health. We wanted to kind of give that elite Ivy League experience of recovery to the masses and make it super cheap through technology so that so many more people could afford to get care that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, because so Lisa, I'll let you tell your story.
Yeah, so my story was circuitous. Like I started using when I was 15 years old, and I lived in Metro Detroit, and I started with alcohol and adored it, and pretty quickly spiraled from there into the rave scene in the 90s. So that was my big outlet as a teenager in high school and in college, was to drive to Detroit and to go to raves. And we talk about this a lot on the team today. I don't really know what drugs I took. Like, honestly, you would go into a rave and you would buy all kinds of ecstasy, opium, things that were laced with a variety of opioids, but it's kind of a, who knows? And I, was pretty entangled in that pretty young, and I took a lot of hallucinogens. I got to the point where I was a daily user by the time that I was 16. And I had just a really hard time functioning. I went through a lot of traumatic experiences. Luckily for me, like school was kind of a refuge for me. And so I made it through school. But then the outside of my life just looked crazy. I moved out when I was 16 into my boyfriend's parents' basement. From there, I just got really lonely and isolated. Like by the end of my using, I didn't want to go to raves anymore. I didn't want to party with people. Like I just was in this really sad state where I'd look at my phone and I'd just be looking for like, who has drugs, who can I call? And I kind of cut everyone out of my life that wasn't somehow a part of that like transaction. And I didn't even want to share my drugs anymore. So it was just me in my apartment with my 2 cats. super isolated. And lucky for me, like I was stopped by car accidents and the police and getting to a point where society was like, you got to stop, like you're
Yeah.
dangerous. And I feel grateful for that. I got sober, I got in trouble and I got forced into recovery. And that doesn't work for a lot of people. It worked for me. Like it really worked for me, because the minute that I walked into, rehab settings and I saw that there was another way to live, I think I got hopeful. And I didn't get it right away, but it was infectious. Like it's really hard once you've seen that world is possible to forget
Yeah,
that
it
it
is.
exists.
It's funny with Workit, as I'm listening to our stories, we started off by saying, by repeating the phrase that you hear. It's something that my dad actually says quite a bit. He says, for addicts and alcoholics, it's jails, institutions, death, or sobriety, right? Jails, institutions, or death. It doesn't end a different way. And I think with Lisa and I, personally, beyond death, obviously we're still alive, we're on a podcast right now, but personally, we kind of run the gamut. I think that we kind of cover the jails and institutions piece. And for Workit, we really wanted another option. We think that's too limited of a range of care options for our people, and we felt really serious about deserving better. And
yeah, you're exactly right. There, the more resources, the more options that are out there, the better the chances people are going to have. And you both kind of touched on something that I'd like to talk about. Robin, you talked about AA and NA programs, and how they don't work for everybody. They do work for a lot of people, but they don't work for everyone. And Lisa, you were saying that what worked for you was almost being pigeonholed into getting clean, or forced by accidents and issues with the law and stuff like that. And everybody's different. We all have a different definition of what rock bottom is, I guess. But I think the one thing that we can all say that we have in common is when you've hit that spot, when you've hit that bottom. It's like a light switch has been turned on. I know for me it was, it was unreal. It was like I woke up one day and it was like, wow, something's got to change here. I'm going to either end up in prison or dead. Clearly I don't want that. So I did what I had to do to get clean. Now that I'm sober, I wanted to get back and provide an outlet for people who have been through addiction, or, anybody who's been touched by addiction. That's why I started the podcast. And so far it's enriched my life. I mean, it's been an amazing experience.
Yeah, I think the more consciousness that you bring to your recovery, the stronger and the more powerful it becomes. And you get to do that work on this podcast every week by telling your story and by talking to other people. For us, Workit provides that outlet to continue to learn from other people's experiences and get stronger. And I think for us, the really important thing is we met so many people that were isolated from, AA and NA because of their comorbidities, because they had to take medication for more serious mental illnesses. And I think that for me personally, my brother has schizophrenia. There's a long history of anxiety disorder in my family. There's all kinds of, I just couldn't imagine a world where the bar for recovery meant no medication and meant no support from, being able to take what you need to take to get to your version of thriving. And I think today, like all these new initiatives, podcasts, companies like Workit are creating so many more paths for you to define what recovery is to you.
And so many more entry points. It's so difficult when I think back to my own personal experience, and I was a daily drinker and a morning drinker. I would drink all day, every day at such a young age. 19, 20 years old, when I went to AA, I was just like, why are they telling me to stop?
Yeah.
There was no sense of just trying to taper off, or every time I was really a deep alcoholic, and anytime I would try to stop myself, I would hallucinate. I would get really bad tremors. It was really serious. And I'd just be like, oh my God, I can't stop. And I think with Workit, we really grappled with that. Lisa and I come from abstinence backgrounds where we just said no, and just stopped. But with Workit, we really tried to make another way to come in. You can start anywhere. You can start with harm reduction. You can start with drinking less. Like, we don't care how you get here. What matters to us is that you stay here.
Yeah, definitely. Keep your eyes on the prize kind of thing. in my own recovery, you know, and even today, even now, it's still difficult. You know, there's temptation every day. There's you know, I had to have a lot of self-control because I was, like I said, I purchased my Suboxone on the street from people that were actively using heroin. When they couldn't find heroin, they would fall back to their Suboxone, basically. You know, and but like I said, just a lot of self-control because, and I'm not going to lie, there were many days throughout my Suboxone use that, you know, I would slip up and take a little more Suboxone than what I'd wean myself down to like 1 milligram. But then 2 days later, I'd have a rough day, so I'd take 4 milligrams that day, you know. But those are the types of behaviors you've got to kind of keep in check. And it does take a lot of self-control. It's not easy. The more support that we can have, the better. You know, you want to stack the deck in your favor in this situation, definitely. With Workit Health, you ladies mainly focus on opioid or opiate addiction, right?
Yeah, so we focus on opioid addiction, but our real belief is that no one has one addiction. So the program that we built has lots of different tracks that allow people to work on all of their kind of co-addictions.
Yeah. I was kind of curious about it.
Yeah. So people come on and they sign up for a major and a couple of minors, and the choices include, you know, opiates, pain, drinking, drugs, gambling, sex and love. Eating disorder is a really popular track. As well as other like caffeine addictions people work on over the time with us. And so what we let people do is focus on no more than 3 at once. And as things trigger them related to those specific conditions, they can get special exercises in the program to work on those. So a lot of times people will have a really rough day with their eating, and that will make them feel like getting high. And so if you're in the program and it's working right, you get to work on both of those things at once. We'll give you something to help with the trigger that's making you want to get high, and we'll also let you get deeper with understanding, you know, where the eating stuff you've got going on is coming from.
Yeah. Also, we are kind of a unique organization in that we place a premium on hiring addicts and alcoholics in recovery. We really like to work with people in recovery because we believe that this really should be a patient-designed, patient-led solution. So something that's also interesting is that we like to contribute shares. We call them shares, but audio clips of our own personal stories, the people on our team, other graduates of the program. And so another thing that we do for people is if they're having a tough time with eating, for instance, but they came in for opioid addiction, we send them a audio share that they can listen to throughout the day of somebody talking about their eating disorder or something, or their solution to their eating problem, something like that. So I think that's another aspect of Workit is that it's so community based, but it's not the same sort of community setting as other options have.
Yeah, exactly. In the same vein of logic, for the Addictions podcast here, you know, I'm not an expert, I'm not a specialist, but I have been there firsthand, you know, and a lot of the podcasts that I looked at before starting my own about addiction, you know, they're hosted by, either addiction specialists or doctors or counselors and things like that, which is great, you know, but I wasn't hearing, you know, firsthand accounts of addiction, you know, and I think that for people that are struggling with addiction, it can be refreshing to hear a voice that's familiar, that somebody that's been there, you know. I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, and it makes a difference. It made a difference for me 10 years ago when I first got sober, and it makes a difference now. I still, in a hard time or in a pinch, I'll call 5 women in recovery. It's incredible. And Lisa, I know you do the same, you know, and
I did that last night, actually. I'm almost 16 years sober, and it's still a daily ritual for me to, you know, reach out and know and like get ahead of it. Like I know that feeling of being lonely or being restless and wanting to crawl out of my skin. And I just have like so many things that I can do to stop it sooner.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. One thing I wanted to ask you ladies was, you know, with addiction, not all the time, but a lot of the time, there are underlying mental health issues beyond just the substance abuse issues. You know, all sorts of stuff going on. In my case, I had post-traumatic stress disorder, which, you know, it didn't help with the addiction. It would often trigger me to use. Now, with Workit Health, is there any aspect of the program where you work on treating mental health or counseling mental health or any of those types of things?
Yeah, so the type of therapy that we do in the Workit program, a lot of it is cognitive behavioral therapy. And the nice thing about cognitive behavioral therapy is that it's super helpful for addiction. It's also incredibly helpful for depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. Like, it's really helpful for behavioral health in general. So there's lots of that stuff like built into the program, and we do everything we can to make sure it's top notch. We get these advisors that are specialists in depression centers to review our content and to be like, hey, what else can we put in here? We know that our patients are also depressed. We know they have trauma. And so we're really proud of how comprehensive it is. But we also refer people out, like if they're going through a major depressive episode or they really need to be seen in an inpatient setting. We have a really close network of providers that we trust that we refer people to directly. And then they can come back to Workit when they're ready to start recovering at home again.
That's awesome. The program just sounds fantastic, and I wish there would have been something like this when I was in the depths of my addiction problems. It just would have been so much easier.
Us too, David. I think that's why we created it. We're building the world we want to live in.
It's fantastic. There's a couple phone numbers on the website, but let's see. I think we've got the 855-659-7734 phone number for Workit Health.
That's right. That'll get you a person, and you can get started right away, hopefully.
So definitely check that out. If there's anybody listening that, struggling with any sort of addiction, I highly, highly recommend Workit Health. It sounds like a fantastic program. Really nice people.
We so appreciate the support. And, we love talking to other people in recovery who have walked the walk. So thanks so much for having us.
Anytime. And I'd love to have you ladies back on in the future. Also, the website, once again, it's workithealth.com, correct?
Yep. Like it works if you work it.
Sounds great. Well, again, I want to thank both of you, Lisa and Robin, for coming on the show. And we will talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, David. Bye. Take care.
Like I said during that conversation, I wish there was a program like Workit Health in existence back when I was struggling to find the right recovery options for myself. And as many of you know, living in a rural area, I had a really difficult time finding an opioid replacement treatment center in my local area. And the only one in my entire county was always fully booked. So I turned to finding Suboxone by purchasing it on the street so that I could wean my substance use lower and lower and then just quit, which I did succeed in doing. But again, I would have much rather been able to do it in a clinical setting. I think that the Workit Health program that Robin and Lisa have put together is exactly what we need to see more of. So I wish them the best in their endeavor to expand the program. If you are struggling with finding help for any sort of addiction, I urge you to check out Workit Health. You can do so by visiting workithealth.com or by calling 855-659-7734. I have also put up a link to their website on the Addictions Podcast Facebook page, which is facebook.com/addictionspodcast, and on the Addictions Podcast website, www.addictionspodcast.com. And again, I want to thank both Lisa and Robin so much for coming on the show. And as always, I thank all of you for listening. It means a lot to me. So thank you. And as always, never quit quitting.
Then you smashed your only car. You aren't what you are really. You missed it by so damn far. Your head feels like it's in a blender, and you hate to see the dawn. Your stomach says return to sender after the buzz is gone. And Sundays you prayed Uncle John. You poisoned yourself last night. Mary slapped your friend Tom. You got in a hell of a fight. Monday comes and it's back to work. The week seems so damn long. time's past, you're still a jerk. After the buzz is gone.